US President Donald Trump has shut down most American foreign aid programs. What impact has that had on Thailand and on US influence around the world? Let's take a deeper dive. I'm Dave Kendall. I'm a senior reporter and producer with the Bangkok Post, and I've been based in Thailand since 2005. On Deeper Dive, I take you beneath the surface of the big issues here in Thailand. Please share and follow this podcast, and you can watch the full video version on Spotify. USAID, or the United States Agency for International Development, is America's main government agency for foreign aid. It was founded in 1961. And it's responsible for delivering humanitarian aid, supporting economic development, and promoting democracy around the world. USAID worked on things like disaster relief, global health, education, and economic growth, often partnering with non-profits, businesses, and local governments to carry out its missions. Now, the idea behind USAID is pretty simple. Helping other countries develop and become more stable is good for both them and the US. It prevents crises, reduces poverty, and builds stronger relationships between nations. In early 2025, US aid and many of the State Department's aid programs became a primary target of US President Donald Trump's campaign to make America great again. Trump said it was run by radical left lunatics, and his cost-cutting hatchet man Elon Musk called it a criminal organization. On January 20th, an executive order announced a 90-day pause in most foreign aid. And in early March, nearly all U.S. foreign assistance programs implemented by USAID and other U.S. agencies were cancelled, devastating humanitarian and development projects ranging from healthcare to refugee support to action on climate and clean energy. What was USAID doing in and around Thailand, and how are the cuts affecting people on the ground? To answer that question, I'm joined by Phil Robertson, the former Deputy Asia Director of Human Rights Watch and the current Director of Asia Human Rights and Labour Advocates Consultancy. Phil has been based in Bangkok for the past 30 years and has worked in countries across the region on human rights, labour rights, democracy promotion, and community development programs. Phil, thanks for joining me here on Deeper Dive. Tell me, what were USAID and the State Department's humanitarian programs doing in Thailand and the region?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different programs that were being supported by various different parts of the U.S. government. There was the USAID programs. Then there was programs that were being supported on democracy and governance by the Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor Bureau of the State Department. Other programs being supported by the Population, Refugees, and Migration Bureau of the State Department. Perhaps most prominent is the work that was being done on the Thai-Myanmar border, particularly with the refugee camps. As soon as the USAID cuts were made, groups like the International Rescue Committee had shut down their hospitals that were servicing refugees. There were a number of cases of elderly refugees who all of a sudden couldn't get the medical care they required and died. And on the other side of Myanmar, in Bangladesh, in the refugee camps that are housing the Rohingya, who fled ethnic cleansing and crimes against humanity inflicted on them in 2017 by the military junta. Those aid programs largely stopped that were provided by USAID. But more importantly, it's after the military coup in 2021 in Myanmar, there was a reprogramming of the USAID money that had been provided to the government. Of course, they stopped providing that as support, and they worked to find other partners. And some of the partners they found were groups and organizations that were working in areas that were controlled by the ethnic groups that were in areas now that are now contested. And in some of those areas, for instance, as ethnic organizations were building up their administrations, they're receiving support for health and education assistance. There was a big Myanmar education consortium that was providing education to children all over eastern Myanmar, and that has all been shut down. And we've also seen, for instance, the democracy and governance programs that were, for instance, being run by Freedom House, that was providing safe houses for people fleeing the military regime in Myanmar. Uh, as they were trying to get to safety, there was a network of safe houses that were being supported by the U.S. government, and those have all been shut down. So it's been a complete and total disaster. Even before we got to the earthquake last week, which has now created a massive humanitarian imperative that the U.S. is failing to meet. I mean, they've gone from leaders to laggards in disaster assistance around the world, and nowhere is that more clear in the situation in Myanmar.
Yeah. Now, the Bangkok Post reported that on February 2nd, a 71-year-old Karen refugee died after the US-funded healthcare facility she depended on was ordered closed. But presumably that's just one of thousands of deaths that have occurred.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, healthcare is a huge issue in Myanmar. So, for instance, there was a big U.S. Supported malarial initiative.
Right. And there's also been tuberculosis programs all over the world, HIV
To
prevention
try to wipe out
programs.
malaria. Resistant malaria. Exactly. Exactly. So when you talk about a humanitarian crisis, certainly the pullout of U.S. resources, which was one of the largest set of resources being given to health and education, you can't replace it. There's an effort, I think, by some other donors to try to step up, but they're just not going to be able to meet the scale and breadth of what the U.S. was funding.
Now, what do you say to people who say, look, Thailand is an middle income country. Why aren't they funding these programs themselves, for instance, for the refugees along the border?
Well, I mean, I would love to see Thailand step up and fund some of those programs, but there's been a reluctance to do so by Thailand. Their claims are that we have a lot of poor people still that we have to support, um, and the refugees are a burden. And so the U.S. assistance has helped persuade Thailand to not try to push them back. People should remember what happened back on the Cambodia border, 30 years ago, where there were pushbacks, and I mean, excuse me, 40 years ago, where there were pushbacks, and ultimately, it was the international community stepping in and saying to Thailand, you can't send those people back. You need to treat them humanely, and we're going to provide resources and support to allow them to stay. That was persuasive in getting the Thai government to change course. So, I mean, I think we have to be realists here. Uh, but there's a larger interest in U.S. For instance, like supporting malarial initiatives along that border, because the Thai-Myanmar border is the source of the various resistant strains of both tuberculosis and malaria. Where if those get into the United States, there's going to be a major problem. So when you talk about providing assistance to try to deal with international health challenges like malaria, there's an incentive, I think, from the U.S. to recognize that those things can come to the U.S. if they're not dealt with somewhere else.
Right. And that was part of the mission of, I mean, ever since it was founded during the Kennedy administration, it was let's fix the problems overseas before they arrive on America's doorstep. That whole concept seems to have gone out of the window now.
Right. Well, I think what we've gone from is an America that had alliances and had a recognition that there was a larger uh, need to work with other partners to America going it alone. Um, you know, make America go it alone is not a make America great again. It's make America stand by itself. And I think that America standing by itself is going to be weaker. It's going to be less connected, and it's going to be more easily surprised and shocked by the sort of things that arrive at its borders, unbeknownst to the U.S. government, because they basically have cut off the links and cut off the connections with other communities and governments and organizations around the world that previously would have alerted the U.S. and said, time to step up and try to figure out this situation right here, where it's easier to fix, it's cheaper to fix, and it's going to result in less human suffering if we fix it right now rather than let it get worse.
And one thing we hear about USAID is that it was helping project America's soft power. What do people mean by that phrase, soft power?
Well, I mean, soft power has been used in a lot of different contexts. We've seen this in Thailand talking about soft power, trying to, you know, it, everything from elephant pants to Thai cooking, to try to encourage tourists to come. But I mean, soft power in this context really means that the U.S. Had a set of values that meant it was prepared to engage and support people around the world, and that they were prepared to try to help them solve their problems. And through soft power, what you do was it wasn't the hard power of the military. It was the soft power of like, here are some ideas, here are some resources, let's work together. And the takeaway would be that local communities would say, hey, those Americans aren't so bad. Those Americans are actually here to help us out and work with us and listen to what we say rather than, just order us around or impose tariffs from afar on the things that we're trying to sell them.
And now that that assistance is gone, there's no immediate motivation for them to say, oh, these Americans aren't such bad guys. Does that open a window for China and Russia to come in?
Well, we're already seeing that happen in some places. So, for instance, um, the situation in Laos and Cambodia, there are still very serious problems connected to wartime ordnance. In Cambodia, it's landmines from the long civil war, which the U.S. Was supporting one side on. In Laos, it's the cluster munitions, the so-called bombies, which still are in the soil and are killing as many as 40 people a year. And the U.S. was recognizing that it had a role to play and it had a historical responsibility to step up to try to solve these problems, which were causing major problems for farmers and other people who are trying to use the land and finding that there were landmines or these cluster munitions still in the ground. With the U.S. cutting that assistance off, now we have China stepping in, both in Cambodia and in Laos. And I'm frankly, to be honest, I'm happy that China is providing some resources to do that. They should be trying to help solve this problem. But what we're going to see in other contexts, like for instance the Myanmar earthquake, the U.S. used to be the leader in disaster response. They had these so-called DART teams composed of experts who would be ready to fly at a moment's notice into a disaster zone and try to coordinate not only the U.S. assistance, but also work with various partners. And you would talk to humanitarians who were involved in these sort of international urgent missions, the sort of the smoke jumpers of humanitarian assistance. And they would say, yeah, the U.S. was one of the best organized, one of the best resourced. You arrive on the ground, they're usually there already. They can tell you what's going on. They've already done an assessment of some of the key areas. They can tell you who's doing what where, so that you don't duplicate efforts. And all that's gone now. In Myanmar, if this had happened during the Biden administration, there would be a 150-person DART team from USAID already on the ground in Myanmar. Instead, we have a week after the fact, 3 guys with approximately $2 million flying into Myanmar, well behind everybody else, saying, okay, we've got to see what we can do with it. As I said, it's from leader to laggard. They're way behind the pack now. It's almost like the U.S. hardly has a presence in these situations anymore. And if you look at who was in first, you had the China team fly in, you had the Russia team flying in, you had the India team fly in. And, if it wasn't a military government, there would have been a lot more groups flying in.
So why is it that the Trump administration would want to cede its influence to China, which it's identified as a strategic rival? If you put yourself in the mindset of the Trump administration, why? Because the amount of money they're saving by cutting these programs is absolutely tiny in relative terms. So
I
aren't
think
they
it's
just
sheer
shooting themselves in the
incompetence.
foot?
I just don't think that these guys have a clue what they're doing. This is they went after foreign aid to start with because they wanted to be seen as budget cutters. So they loosed Elon Musk on USAID because they recognize that most Americans don't understand what foreign assistance is or what it does, and there would be fewer defenders. So that was the first victim, and it was the first agency to be knocked down in what is a campaign of intimidation. And this is the game that's being played. They want to be seen as budget cutters. They want to be seen as budget hawks, going after tiny little programs so that when they pass this massive tax cut and give it to billionaires, which is, now proceeding, there's a just the passage of a resolution in the Senate 52 to 48 just yesterday to start that whole process, that the American people will think that they're not blowing the Trump administration is not blowing up the budget, but actually they're trying to cut it. This is all smoke and mirrors. And the reality is that I don't think the Trump administration cares about what is happening in Myanmar or what is happening in Thailand. I mean, they see these governments as somehow evil and trying to take advantage of the U.S., which is why they've hit them with these massive tariff increases on any sort of export being sent from Thailand or Myanmar or Cambodia or Vietnam or China to the U.S. That somehow the world is trying to take advantage of the Americans. It's an insular, know nothing approach that the Trump administration is undertaking, and they simply repeat mantras that they think are going to, resonate with their base while they knock down programs and knock out qualified people, fire qualified people that were leading those programs. And, so what's happening to USAID is also going to happen to education programs in the U.S. It's happening to health programs in the U.S. It's happening to other numerous programs across the entire federal government. And so it's a bit of a sort of U.S. government Armageddon, but the Armageddon is internal. That they're basically blowing up the capacity of the federal government to do many different things. And I think of what Grover Norquist, who was a real hard right conservative, who was part of a sort of budget cutting group back in the 1980s. And he said that his objective was to cut the federal government down to the size where it was small enough to drown in a bathtub. And, I mean, I think that this is one of the things that these Trump people are after. I mean, they're ideologues and they don't care about outcomes or results. They just care about what they believe and what they can do with their power. And they're prepared to run roughshod over arguments that, try to reason with them or make common sense. Like, it's actually a good thing to deal with, pandemics overseas. It's actually a good thing to try to, work with people so that, issues don't come to the United States. It's a better idea to try to solve these problems overseas rather than wait till they come to your doorstep. I think they think that if it comes to their doorstep, then that's just another thing to frighten people, and they can, take advantage of that for political reasons.
Is this mentality connected with the decision to axe Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, and Radio Free Europe also? Is there a connection?
Well, I think certainly, there was already a belief, particularly on the far right, that somehow Voice of America was sending the wrong message about the United States. And, in fact, if you look at Voice of America, it is, fair, balanced, and unbiased news. It is, well done by professionals. But, just like the propagandists in Beijing, we have propagandists on the far right, and they want Voice of America to appear like Newsmax or Fox News or One America Network, which would only parrot their line and their take on the world. It's interesting. They accuse BOA of being biased, but what they want to replace it with is something that would be biased towards their point of view. So, they're blowing up again an institution that has 83 years of broadcasting history and a wide audience that is now wondering why they're off the air. And it's because, the Trump administration wants propagandists paid by the US government. They don't want to have independent, impartial news. And unfortunately, Radio Free Asia, Beinar News, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and other broadcasting institutions are underneath the rubric of the U.S. Agency for Global Media. And so that means that they're getting hit too. And, Radio Free Asia, they're the ones who broke the Uyghur forced labor story and that, and the genocide that's going on there. They're the ones who have, been puncturing the veil in North Korea, or, reporting on what's happening in Myanmar or Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. They're the ones who really led the region in, getting news out of these very, very close societies, and also broadcasting news back in, so that, Vietnamese, Lao, Cambodians, others could actually hear about what was happening in their countries, because they can't get any other independent source of news. And for the Trump administration to blow that up, I think is outrageous and unacceptable, and completely against what they have said they want to do, which is to contest China's influence. I mean, I don't think they want to contest China with tariffs and bottle them up. They think it goes away.
Finally, Phil, what's the mood on the ground amongst the humanitarian community and the development community? Is there any hope that the funding will be restored, or it will come from other sources?
I think there's a great deal of despair and disappointment that, all these programs, which people had worked so hard on, which had value, which had clear target audiences and important things to accomplish, were brought to a screeching halt. I think most people are realistic, recognizing that not only did the Trump and his minion Elon Musk turn off the money for USAID and these other foreign aid programs, but they've also destroyed the infrastructure. They basically fired all the staff. So even if you wanted to turn it back on, you wouldn't be able to do so. And that has been hugely damaging. I mean, I've talked to people who are right now trying to figure out how to shut down multi-year USAID funded programs. And shutting down a program like that is not an easy thing to do. You have to have a whole checklist. You have to go through various different aspects of this, that, the other, make sure you comply with federal law in shutting these things down. And they have no guidance. They can't get anybody on the phone at USAID to tell them, okay, do this and don't do that. So, in fact, you still have people walking around in the dark, trying to figure out what to do next. And so I don't think that people are expecting that USAID funding or the other sources of US funding to come back online. I obviously think that there is some hope that some other sources of funds can be found, but most people are also realistic that the USAID and other funding from the US government was the lion's share of many areas of work. For instance, like the democracy and governance that works on political reforms, protects human rights, deals with human trafficking, such as the scam centers, works on transnational repression. All those sorts of work were dominated by US government funding streams, and they've just all disappeared. And so at a time when authoritarians are cheering not only the demise of Radio Free Asia and Voice of America, they're also looking around and seeing that the NGOs and others who would have raised concerns and resisted the efforts by those authoritarians to sort of go after community leaders or activists, that those NGOs are also missing in action because they've either been shuttered or been frozen, awaiting some sort of tranche of funds that will never come.
It's grim tidings. Phil Robertson, thanks so much for joining me here on Deeper Dive. What do you think about the cuts to American foreign aid? Please comment, rate, and share the podcast. And as always, keep up with all the latest local and international news at BangkokPost.com. I'm Dave Kendall. and I'll see you again soon for another deeper dive.